This is legit the best Doctor Who I've experienced, right? I would say in years and years and years. I mean, I don't even know how many years it is. Now, Paul Cornell, bit of a major douchebag in my estimation. One of the one of the greatest Doctor Who authors, especially of the modern era, right? Just such an incredibly solid author that really, really understands Doctor Who and storytelling and is able to put it all together. So he wrote the original book, and then it was adapted by Elizabeth Miles. Elizabeth Miles does not have a good pedigree. Like everything she does, generally speaking, is a bit of a dud. Here, let's have a quick look at the works of Elizabeth Miles. So most of the ones I can't talk about because I don't listen to her. So, man, she hasn't done anything for a while. Wow, that's a long way. She's been out of favor. Well, last thing was this. Where's that from? December 23. So, and then this is 22, isn't it? Wow, she only did one thing a year right now, and this was November. Yeah, before she was in freaking everything, right? So I don't remember any of these things, right? These are all incredibly forgettable, right? I like the backup story she did on the Stephen Noonan one, but more for Stephen Noonan, right? So it's a procession of the unremarkable. She did a terrible one here with Babe and the Butcher. And The Grey Man of the Mountain was reasonably interesting up until the last part where it all kind of fell apart, right? So Elizabeth Miles, not the greatest Doctor Who scribe in the world. Boy, did she knock it out of the park with this script, right? This script is absolutely banging, right? It is so freaking good. So, if you don't know what the missing adventures were, the new adventures were a range of Doctor Who books. That was essentially, it was an era in of itself, right? It continued Doctor Who when it was off the air, and it became much more, I would say adult, but more, I would say adolescent, maybe no, older than adolescent. Like it stopped being aimed at like, smart 12-year-olds and was aimed at 18-year-olds instead, right? These books, and they were somewhat more adult in nature. But the tone was definitely more adult, more complex, more cerebral. But it very much still Doctor Who. But again, so that was the Rad Doctor Who. We had Rad Doctor Who and we had Trad Doctor Who in the 90s. So the new adventures were the Rad Doctor Who. But people said, they were selling like hotcakes. They were doing really well. It was a very successful range. And then they said, well, people want old Doctor Who, and so let's do the missing adventures, which would be much more traditional. It didn't really succeed in being more traditional. However, this is an absolutely perfect representation of the Peter Davison, Nyssa and Tegan TARDIS team, right? Fifth Doctor, Nyssa and Tegan TARDIS team, while being much more complex and intricate as you would expect with a novel. So whenever I listen to things, I always try and put them in the context of how it would have appeared. Like they did this thing called what was it, Graceless, with Peter Davison. What was the name of that thing? Oh man, it was a long time ago. Here, let me see if I can look up Graceless. It was hang on. If I look up Laura Donington, right now, then I should. There we go. Wicked Sisters. They did this. When was it? In 2020. Not a success in my mind, right? It was okay. So this is so complex to get into. You had these two reasonably hot chicks who were the tracer to find the key to time, right? They had all these superpowers, and it was a story with the Fifth Doctor and Leela. And it didn't really work because there's no way. Firstly, it was more of a more adult-orientated series of the Graceless. That's the vibe I went into. And Peter Davison didn't really fit into it that nicely. And then you had the traditional Peter Davison music. Yes, it wasn't a success, right? In my mind, was it because I couldn't imagine it in my mind's eye, right? It just didn't pull together. This I was able to, but so this was more like, for some inexplicable reason, they get a big budget to do like a 3-part mini-series over Christmas. And it's, instead of looking like Warriors of the Deep, it looks like The Singing Detective, right? It gets like a real on-film budget. And because it's like a much bigger story, it's much more complex and I would say interesting. So the basic elevator pitch for this is the Fifth Doctor versus vampires, right? And they're much more of the cool Lost Boys, Keith Sutherland type vampire than your Dracula-esque vampire. But it wraps itself so seamlessly around Doctor Who lore without tearing up Doctor Who lore, right? This is an interesting way of adding more new things into Doctor Who lore. 1 second. Oh, okay. 1 second. I got to got to answer this question. Now I found out what my son was asking me. My son was asking me if he needs to fast tomorrow. So because it's a Jewish fast, as I was saying earlier. So and he's in combat in Gaza. So let me just reply. I would say no. But see, I would say no. Right. When you're in combat, don't fast. It's probably a bad idea. Anyway, I digress. Goth opera. So so for me, it feels like a over Christmas 3-part miniseries with a much bigger budget, but still it fits into that 1986, 85, 83 TV landscape, just the higher end of it. So it starts off with a little bit of a voiceover from Rassilon, played by what's his name? What was he in? Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit? I can't remember what it was in. Here, 1 second. But it's a blink and let's see if he's in the cast list. It's like a blink and you miss it. Richard Armitage, right? It's a blink and you miss it. Was it cameo? But the interesting thing about this, it really ties together Gallifreyan lore and the Time Lords and the vampires, about what their conflict was really about, and the connection between the two of them, which again I found all this very, very compelling, right? So imagine Doctor Who doing a 3-part miniseries in 1982 with a budget of The Singing Detective and production value of The Singing Detective, with Lost Boys-esque vampires in Leeds. Okay, there you go. That's exactly what it is. And so the premise itself is very, very good, but the characterization is freaking brilliant. You got this, starts off the Doctor's in Australia playing cricket and drinking tea, right? And in the making of Pete Davis says, I never drank tea. I don't drink tea at all. Because it's a very doctorish thing to be sipping tea. And they get drawn into this plot. You have a time lady called Ruth, who is a contemporary of the Doctor. She was in the year above her, the above Doctor in the Pyrodonian Academy. And it's hinted they were kind of boyfriend and girlfriend. And so she's been obsessed with vampire and vampiric lore from a Gallifreyan point of view all her life. And so she's setting about to find the vampire messiah, and she's got this big plan to reintroduce vampires into open society, into the world, as they've been like driven into the outskirts of they've been driven into hiding. So she's very much into doing a fusion between the Time Lords and the vampires, reviving a major vampire to do that. The emotional arc that takes you through the 3-part series is Nyssa gets bitten and starts to be turned into a vampire, and that's freaking brilliant, right? Because Nyssa is kind of a wet, boring, weedy character, And yes, she is. I'm sorry. Sara Sutton is way more interesting than Nyssa. The most interesting thing she ever did was whip her skirt off in Terminus, and even that was a bit dull, right? And the stuff she's done in Big Finish has been way better. So you have, it's very, very true to a character of her being a very straight-laced, proper person, and her turning into a vampire at the same time, right? And how Nyssa would cope with that, and how Nyssa and Tegan's relationship is somewhat strained because of that. And so I really don't want to spoil this to you, but man, this is absolutely hands down the best Doctor Who. And it is so organically and genuinely Doctor Who, while being different and interesting, pushing forward. It's really the best of all possible worlds, right? I wish they would still do stuff of this quality. They haven't got anything even vaguely approaching this quality anymore, right? It's crazy how good this is. And like, how could, I mean, like, again, I listened to it. If I had more time, I would have listened to it in one go. But unfortunately, I didn't have more time. So, how much is this thing? Let me look. Because it goes up. Okay, I very rarely say this. Very, very rarely say this. That $24.50, $25, 100% worth it, right? 100% worth it. Rassilon speaks. Yeah, again, it's more of a going back to the dawn of time. There's it's intimated that Rassilon became a vampire, and there was a lot more of connection between vampires and Time Lords. Right? So I'm intrigued to see how they. Let's look at backstage. We have, it's reasonably dull, right? Mika Balfour, I guess he's the bad guy. He was excellent, by the way. Yeah, the bad guy was freaking excellent in this. He exuded power and authority, which is what you want from a bad guy, right? And he seemed like a real foil for the Doctor. Rueth also exuded quality. She really, really knocked out the park, right? This may be one of their best releases ever, and I'm really not overselling it to you at all. It really genuinely is. So let's see what they've got to say about it. Producer and director David O'Malley says Goth Opera has everything: vampires, superpowers, blood, guts, and gore. That's all true. And also they did something which I thought was just brilliant. Right? They had an evangelical preacher in it, an American evangelical preacher. And they were nice to him, right? They weren't like, oh, what an idiot. It was a very positive representation of religion, right? And not full of bile and hatred, and certainly no identity politics in it. I would not call this woke in any way, shape, or form, but I will call this, yes, a rattling good event. So let's see what they have to say about it. Goth has everything: vampires, superpowers, blood, guts, and gore. And of course, Peter Davison's Doctor alongside Tegan and Nyssa. Now, when you read that, you'll think, well, that doesn't go at all, right? That blood, guts, and gore, that just doesn't go with, well, I guess Caves of Androzani had more bullets to death ratio or something than what was it, First Blood? I think it was some crazy number, right? And it's all set in and around Manchester. Well, there are bits in it that set around in Australia, which gives us a lovely opportunity to bring in young and exciting Northern actors. You know, again, I have to say, this casting was great, right? Normally, and this is why I hate the age of woke, right? When you see, like, everybody apart from the regulars being black or some other minority, you go, it's just like, identity, diverse casting. No, these people are freaking great, right? Especially the chief vampire, who was drools with charm and power, right? Elizabeth Masters brilliant adapted Paul Connor's novel, and she did, right? Hats off to her. She did an excellent job of pulling this one together. Paul Cornell's novel, and with an incredible voice cast they were, including the wonderful Richard Armitage giving us a Rassilon prologue and a vampiric romp through the Whoniverse, not to miss. That's it. It's a vampire romp throughout the universe. It's a fun story. It actually is a fun story. And again, that the Fifth Doctor fits organically into this, much more adult than normal story. I think it's just a testament to how good this product is. And the Doctor has a history fighting vampires, which I was never aware of. Vampires and his strange love for tea. Oh, yeah, he talks about that in the thing. Like, what's he doing drinking tea all the time? Because the Doctor's thing to do are the two things the Doctor has to cope with in the story. Sarah Sutton said, it's a very good story for Nyssa. It's a very good... Okay, all this is in the making of. The idea that Nyssa with fangs is quite something. I remember when I first saw the cover for the novel, when it was put in front of me to sign at convention, I was shocked with the amount of blood on Nyssa's costume. Let's see if I can find the original cover. Goth Opera original cover. I wonder if it's going to come up. There you go. Open a new window. Oop, did the wrong thing. Sorry. Right. So yeah, the original one they painted all this blood out, right? And the Dracula-esque castle is a I won't spoil that for you, right? But that's a very organic Doctor Who-y part. When I put it in front of me, I was shocked at the amount of blood on this costume, so I made a complaint about that. And next time I saw it, they reduced the amount of blood. You're the reason they changed that? Oh, such a bummer. Because it was so much better, right? Oh my God, it was so much better. Doink. Yeah, too small. It was genuinely much better with the copious amounts of blood. Exhibit A, right? It's genuinely better with that. So they reduced the amount of blood. They removed all of it. Janet Fielding said, it's a corker of a story. Amazingly, I'm agreeing with Janet Fielding. If you like the Fifth Doctor, again, this is like widescreen Fifth Doctor, but still feels like the Fifth Doctor. Very good plot, very good, very action-packed it is. And a sense of jeopardy, which is quite high. And Sarah does a good evil. No, not really. She's not really being evil in it. There is one bit where she tries. She is evil a little bit, but it doesn't. That's not really define a character. I'm not looking at it the same way again. Well, it's always a quiet one, darling. Always a quiet one. So yeah, for me, massive recommend. Right? Yeah, this is Big Finish at its absolute finest. I just wish it could keep up this quality, right? That would be fan-freaking-tastic. Look, my name's Vila Beckin, the Rabbi from another planet. Please like, share, and subscribe, and ring that little bell. Ring the little bell so you're notified when new videos drop.